Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the Planning Commission podcast. The commission is in session. Commissioner Smith, Commissioner Kostelik, how are we doing?
Peachy.
Yeah, this is a much better week.
Is it? Okay.
Yeah.
I'm glad to hear that. A little pep in our voice. Come on now. All right. First of all, before we get too far ahead of ourselves, I want to just take a quick moment on behalf of the three of us to everybody who has tuned in, listened to our podcasts, and really given us some feedback. I've been surprised. I know that some very positive things have been coming back to us, and I really, really appreciate everybody who is along with us on this journey. As I mentioned from the outset, we'll continue to get better. Any other ideas that people have, send them our way. Any other guests that you think we should interview, send them our way. But on behalf of the three of us, first and foremost, thank you. We appreciate your support. So today's episode, levels of service only applies to brothels. Holy cow. Now that's a topic that is one that we've been waiting to talk about for quite some time. Level of service in particular is quite complicated. Now, to my fellow commissioners, each of you, I hope, has seen the movie Philadelphia. Shake your head or say yes if you have. Yes? No,
Yes.
We have. Yes, you have. Okay, so one has not. Don, hopefully you remember the scene when Denzel Washington says to the lead character played by Tom Hanks, I need you to explain this to me like I was 5, right? Remember that scene?
Mm-hmm.
This is the danger that we have on this episode, because the level of service can really get in the weeds, right? So we're going to talk about this as if we're 5 to an extent and get into the technicals as we go. But what the heck is level of service? Don, give us a sense. I want you to tell us your basic definition. What is level of service to those of us who are listening and have no clue what it's about?
Simply put, a traffic engineering measure of driver delay.
Well, that's simple. Wow. But it also applies to other things too, right? Like parks and emergency services and other forms of well, yes.
What?
We absolutely have things like level of service because we have different impact fee systems, right? That go towards these different types of civic types of treatments. And so how is that level of service? How is that, measured in many facets? But today we're going to talk about the transportation one. And Jess, tell me, you're the engineer amongst the three of us. How much experience have you had in your career when it comes to this wonderful world of LOS?
Well, level of service. So LOS stands for level of service. For those of you listening that have zero interest in what this, what all our acronyms mean, but that level of service is the level of service that a roadway is giving you as the driver. And so you think of it on a scale of A to F. F, just like grades in school, F is failing, and A is we feel real good about it. And the A, it's not necessarily good as far as operations are concerned. You're not getting your biggest bang for your buck on the road, because level of service A, it's free flow all day long. There are very few other cars on the road. And this is something that we don't actually look for that as a goal in traffic engineering. We look more around C or D. And even though those sound like lower grades, like that would be not the best, if you think about it, C is average and D is a little below average. And so when you get to C and D's level of service, the way that we're calculating that and the way that we're looking for the number of cars that are appropriate on the road is it's what my professor used to say, my traffic engineering professor used to say, it's pleasantly plump. And what that means is
Can we still say that? Is that allowed?
100%,
I don't know.
You put brothel in the title of this episode, so I think we can get away with pleasantly plump.
Pleasantly plump.
Now, I want to interject into that though, because I think the way Jess introduced it and explained it is part of the problem of the nomenclature of this measure.
Sir. Yes, sir.
Using the word failing, that when elected officials and decision makers and just general members of the public hear that, it's like, oh, hell no, we can't have that. We can't have a system that's failing. Well, whoever said that was failing? Well, it might be a system that may not be moving as somebody might desire, but it goes back to the whole thing that level of service F to a traffic engineer is A to an economist, because we are maximizing the economic potential of a particular place when it's there. And I think what I'm getting at is I think that's the reason we're having this episode, is to get at the fallacies there. And I'll say this, and then we can talk about
Fallacy
it later.
and brothel.
Yeah,
we're
see?
getting there. Okay.
Well, and it's not even really to a traffic engineer, y'all. It's not failing. When you get to level of service F, it's forced traffic flow, I believe. And I'm really glad that our guest is on here, and we'll talk more about us later. But that's talking level of service F is like stop and go, really poor travel time. So you're talking about almost a total breakdown. This is what, if you were on, you know what, level of service looks like this. When you're on Waze, the navigation app on your phone, and Waze, you can actually, it crowdsources how well the traffic flow is on the highway, right? So you can actually, there are 3 levels that you can say it is. You can say it's traffic's a little heavy. It's like 1 car. Then you have the traffic is heavy, you know, and it's got no, and then it's like 3 is breakdown, like that it's stopped. There's the traffic is a real bad. And so that's kind of a way you could think about level of service. Now we have these several different levels, like I was saying, A through F, but in F, you're talking about the system is not operating at all. So if you think about it in a highway terminology, you have no operation, no one's moving. It's level service F is also what you would reach if a bridge went out. Nobody's going to move because the bridge, at the end of that bridge, you can't move, right?
It's how I grew up in the Southern California area.
Exactly.
When you're hitting the freeway and your entire freaking life is geared around, I got to leave 3 hours ahead of time.
Yeah.
Because it's why sports fans leave games in the 7th inning or
That's right.
3rd quarter,
Yeah.
because they know that there's going to be, I was just in California last week, and oh God, I do not miss any of that. Right. And that's how it's sort of relatable to the general public. But there are consequences of building everything out too big, and we need to make sure we continue to relate this back to the everyday person's sort of experiences, right? And so before we get into our discussion with our fabulous guest, thinking of our everyday experience, Don and whiskey is everyday. Don, tell us about your whiskey pairing. What are we thinking goes with this wonderful topic of level of service?
Well, you haven't quite clued in on who our guest is yet, so I'll kind of prompt that. She's from the state of Michigan, in Grand Rapids specifically. And during Prohibition, Michigan served a vital role in whiskey getting from Canada illegally into the United States. So I was thinking about that and thinking, well, it was mostly rot gut whiskey anyway. So for today, I'm going with the Crown Royal whiskey and cola in a can.
Yes.
For our special guest for that. So we're going to go. Oh, wait.
Oh,
yes.
That's my favorite noise.
Yes.
Speaking of rot gut. Yeah. Well, I wonder if any city was bold enough to name themselves that. I mean, we still have the one from North Carolina that I think is our best city. What is it called? Sandy Mush. Yes, that's the best city so far that we've heard.
You'll have to have our guest tell us where she grew up, though.
Okay.
That's my favorite name of a city in the U.S. And some might
Okay.
argue it's not in the U.S.
Well, I can't think of a better way to begin the introduction to our fabulous guest than referencing a poorly named city from where she's from. Our guest today is, in fact, the project manager and office lead for Spalding de Decker out of Grand Rapids, and she is none other than Ariana Jeske. Ariana, it's a pleasure to have you. Thanks for being in.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
All right. Tell us all about you. Tell us about your background. Apparently, we need to know where your city is, your origins are, and take it from there.
So I grew up in Ishpeming, Michigan.
Whoa,
which is
good.
spelled phonetically as it sounds. It's an Ojibwa word that means heaven, supposedly.
Okay.
A little bit of a misnomer. The 20 feet of snow will do that to you. So that was in the upper peninsula of Michigan. That part everybody thinks is Wisconsin or Canada. I went to Michigan Technological University. In Houghton, Michigan. So
Houghton,
which is even farther north in the UP. And then I followed my husband to North Carolina and
Gosh,
experienced a
does
bit of
everybody
culture
go to
shock.
North Carolina? Is
Yes.
at some
Yes.
point?
Well, I mean,
Okay.
look at the Wright brothers. Look at their failed attempt to leave North Carolina, which set off a whole new industry and stuff. But I think we're the three examples of you kind of go there and then, like the Wright brothers, you try to escape.
Yeah, I was part of the, Michigan led the trend in terms of recession. So we were
Oh.
kind of, left and went down there and yes, ran into a lot of Michiganders. So yeah, I've been a consultant in various forms for about 17 years. Traffic engineering and transportation engineering has been my main focus. I am a PE and then also a PTOE, which is a professional traffic operations engineer, which means I'm really good at taking tests.
Yes. And probably paying dues, right? Do you have to?
Yeah,
Don't complain. There might be somebody listening who is responsible for said dues. But don't worry, we're going to be having a future episode on AICP soon. So it goes into a different world too, but awesome. So, well, tell us a little bit more about what you get paid to do.
So at the moment, I'm a project manager, lead our Grand Rapids office. So it's almost everything from people to paper clips. I have to email our building people a lot more than I would expected in learning from engineering school. So I do a fair amount of transportation projects around Grand Rapids area, traffic impact studies. I help kind of write the scopes for those, figure those out. Also just kind of various transportation projects that are funded through the state. Michigan has a kind of program where money is given directly to local agencies. And so it's bid through MDOT and kind of their power, their system and whatnot. So that's a fair amount of my work. And then just kind of keeping young engineers going and trying to explain the gray areas of engineering and, keep them from running from the profession.
And in line with our podcast here, you also serve on the planning commission for your local community?
Yes.
That's amazing.
Yeah, I live in a rural township north of town, Grand Rapids. I like the country. And yes, so I am on the planning commission and get to be the sleeper engineer for the, egotistical engineers that come in and go, these people don't know anything.
Oh man, I love that. I love it. I love it.
It's when they try to slip that traffic study that looks like a middle schooler's book report by you that you just kind of start picking them apart, right?
Mm-hmm.
Ariana.
So what did you heard our intros, Ariana, on level of service? What did we miss? What did we miss in defining level of service? Is it a good metric? Is it an outdated metric? Is it something that needs refresh? What's your quick take on it?
So the thing is, it's a tool. It's all in how you apply it. Yes, you can cut somebody open with a circular saw, but you're not going to use that for open heart surgery. So
what? Why not?
Some have tried.
Do we now talk about surgery? Because I've never had surgery.
So you're saying LOS is like how we used to amputate limbs during the Civil War?
Yeah, kind of that. I mean, it's got its applications. So
bite a stick and just bear it, man.
And
yeah,
drink a lot of whiskey.
So I mean, it is a metric that we came up with to try to quantify how traffic performs. And performance itself is kind of an arbitrary measurement, So there's ways that level of service is useful. Like I think of it more as if you're kind of trying to triage a network or something, where if you have a city that you figure out level of service for all your north-south routes, is undesirable. We actually don't say failing in our reports anymore. We say undesirable. So it gives you an idea that, all of my north-south options for people to move from the south part of the city to the north part of the city, I need to make more options for that. Not necessarily I need to make more roads, I need to make more options. Because what they're trying to form the highway capacity manual into, because it started out in the 60s and the age of the car and the interstate. And so they're slowly trying to morph this dinosaur into people trips and how people move as opposed to how cars move. And so, I mean, there's a lot of different metrics. Like there's level of service for pedestrians. Like you can calculate that. It's something that very rarely.
What?
Hey, that is one of my greatest achievements is that I got DOT to pay $1 million for a rails to trail bridge because I showed that level of service was an F for pedestrians and you'd had to wait 2 minutes for an appropriate gap.
And a lesson for the advocates and others out there when you're in these meetings and you hear a lot about level of service for motor vehicles. The exact same software has the tabs for pedestrian, bicyclist, and transit level of service. Is that correct?
Yes.
Why is that not applied in all of those traffic studies and all of that if the same software is being used?
It's one of those things where the data, so and this is one of my frustrations that has turned me to a traffic engineer for good, if you will, is that so much of the pedestrian accommodations or things that we would do to a road, we get well, nobody's using it. Well, nobody's going to try to cross, this certain death road if there's not anything that helps them do that. So the level of service, for a pedestrian, you can determine that without having to know how many people use it. And so, I mean, it's something that I know in our traffic studies that I've done, there's always been a transit and bicycle and pedestrian, like a non-motorized component. Are we able to attribute any of these trips to the site, to these other modes? And because I work in a very area with some patchy transit, and some townships are great with their non-motorized, some aren't, it's a lot of we considered it, but the nearest transit stop to this site is 3 miles away.
So Ariana, when you let's go back a little bit, and we were talking about level of service, and now you're saying there can be different level of service, I guess, styles for different modes. What would you like? How would you tweak level of service? Like if you had a magic engineering policy and spec wand, what would you change? How would you kind of set it up?
So I think where level of service falls apart is where you have a study that you do only on this one roadway and you're considering just the traffic on this roadway. You're not considering your network, and you determine that, this needs a right lane here because we're, having level of service F or, something undesirable. And so it's when it kind of gets down into those nitty gritty details and you don't look out kind of at the bigger picture of your network. So the way that we apply level of service, I think, is kind of the biggest issue. I mean, it's like any other tool that we have as engineers, like we have to know its weaknesses, its strengths, and have that judgment to apply it correctly. And it's not been applied correctly for a while.
Right. So thinking back to engineering school, when you take traffic engineering 101 or whatever they're calling it now, like that's what they have us do though, right? They say, here's the road, here's the numbers, and they have all these assumptions laid out, and they have you work the formulas so that you can get it to level of service D or C or whatever the question asks. And then we go out in the work world, and for some reason we keep doing that. I don't know why, but when you do TIAs for a living, you start to learn that, oh, wait a second. Hopefully you've got somebody around you going, consider all of this. Or maybe you have like a real annoying planner in the back going, you have to remember there's a school on the end of that block, or whatever. So, that's something that has always been strange to me. Like, and Ariana, I want to share with our listeners that Ariana was the first person that I worked with right out of college, and we were sat next to each other. We were in little cubes, and she was like 3 years out of school, and I was like 0. So she knew just a little bit more than I did, and she didn't like explain things to me like I was stupid, even though, let's be honest, you were real sweet. Like I was real dumb. And so, I remember collecting traffic data with Ariana and stuff like that. But the best thing I ever did though was explain to her Southern stuff. So like she came straight from Michigan. She had her accent was beautiful. But when she told me where she was from, which is basically Canada, I was like, look, we're going to have to explain this to everyone here. And I put a sign outside our cubes and it said Canada that way. And it was an arrow pointing at her cube. And then and she was just like, what is wrong with you? Like north is that way. And I was like, no. Let me explain this. And I made another sign and I put it between our cubes. And do you remember what it said on top of our cubes? Like the line?
Oh, was it the Mason-Dixon line?
Yes, it was.
Well, I mean, have you ever done a traffic study for a boiled peanut stand?
Yeah. I mean,
Oh God. Okay. Yeah. Just can never do that.
I'm banned from trying to say that phrase from here forth because apparently when I try to say it, something else comes out. If
Yeah,
you've
well,
listened to episode 1. So
it's, it goes
I've-
with the theme today. It goes with the
yeah,
theme
this
today.
is true. This is true.
Mhm.
Parking for your boiled. Well, never mind. Anyway, Ariana, I have a question to ask you, and this is I'm going to take it back to the public a little bit, but what would surprise the public about level of service?
Ooh.
What's something about this concept and this metric that we've been using? You said it goes all the way back to the 60s. We're still using it in many ways to prop up our capital improvement plans and our developments and all that. But what's something that the general public who doesn't know this subject very well at all would be surprised about when it comes to it?
We, as a kind of society, tend to think of engineering as this very precise, very, derived through calculus and proven and, like the immutable laws of physics. But engineering is the application of science. And so that's how we take those tools and we move through them. And so there's no physics, there's no grand universal theory of how traffic flows or, how all that works. So we're fitting equations to kind of what we've seen in the world. And we're also making a lot of assumptions that like people will behave the same, that drivers in New York are going to behave the same as drivers in North Carolina. And so it's this empirical tool that we've kind of jammed, some things into that we can make it work for what we're trying to do. And so it's not exact, it's an approximation. I mean, it's the best we can do. And so I think that's kind of the big thing that people tend to think that this engineering is precise and, like you could go down there with a stopwatch and, do your travel time through this corridor and it's going to match exactly what this report says.
But I think it gets to the point, if I'm an elected official and I'm looking at this transportation study and I'm trying to decide where do we invest $1 million, 5 million, 10 million, and you show me a table that says you're going to have 235 vehicles turning right in the year 2045 in the peak hour, therefore you need to do X, Y, and Z, that looks pretty precise. That makes me pretty confident in making that decision to spend that money. Where's that incorrect in making that assumption?
It's how you build your data, your whole traffic study. I mean, we can kind of traffic impact studies are probably their own podcast unto themselves, but yeah.
Wow.
There's a lot of assumptions because we don't have 20 years of traffic data going back, or we don't know exactly how, population trends are going to happen. And, we're considering one parcel and we're looking at traffic data. We maybe have a couple points down the road. And in Michigan, because of just the great, kind of economic upheavals and, kind of the Rust Belt effect. I mean, I can look at traffic and see that it was down 20% 4 years ago, up 3%, down 12, and so we have to choose a reasonable growth factor to add to that traffic to try to grow it out. And so that's kind of where things can start to go awry. I mean, I've had areas like that and public agencies are kind of loath to use a negative growth rate, even though that might be reflecting actually what's happening, because they're kind of, trying to capture any potential for improvements.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think we've got examples here at the opposite. If you talk about Michigan and some stagnant growth in certainly certain metro areas, here where we are in Boise, Chris and I, we've had rapid growth, and we can still show you major arterials that have traffic that has declined in the last 12 or 15 years on a single road. Or we've got a famous downtown couplet that's been a controversy in downtown Boise because it's definitely acted as a barrier for a lot of downtown. And when they built that original corridor in 1980, they had a traffic forecast for the year 2000. And by the late, when I look at traffic figures for 2018, 2019, they weren't even yet at levels predicted for 2000. Yet that's what we spent all that money on. And that's what we refuse. Our state refuses to allow a lane on that to be repurposed because of this mythical level of service. And so even in the rapid growing areas, I think your point about the system impact, have we had growth on our overall system? Yes, but it's not spread like peanut butter across every corridor.
Yeah. And what Don keeps talking about, this level of service and the quarter and the system impact. So what I want to ask you is about when we apply adding a lane, or like Don was saying, repurposing a lane, but mostly I'm thinking about adding lanes to add capacity to a roadway. I want a couple of things. Can you tell our listeners what adding capacity means? And then why that can be dangerous, not in a safety way, but like what's the outfalls and kind of the downsides of adding capacity? What happens when we try to, in other words, build our way out of congestion on a road?
And you end up with, I think it's like the biggest one in the US is 26 lanes across in Houston, something to that effect.
Yeah.
And so people tend to think of traffic as like water that's flowing. And if you look at our road system, it's kind of like a tributary. We have collectors, we have, minors and, arterials, and they all kind of come together into bigger and bigger roads. And that's kind of how our system is developed. I mean, especially if you look in suburbia, like that is what's going on there.
It's that car dependency, the great auto movement. And thank you very much from Michigan, right?
Yes, I know.
Yeah, we love it. No, it's very American. It's very American. Having your independence, having your car, being able to do things. That was a big deal at the time. So
anyway. Well, it was also pitched as everybody's going to be able to drive everywhere, and we have the system and the resources to accommodate that forever. And I would still say some of our highest institutional levels of transportation at the state level still kind of reflect that. What have you seen for cities and others that are looking to do stuff differently to maybe use it as a metric, but not the metric?
Well, Don, let's go right back to real quick. Let's go back to the first part of like why we can't, like, why are we building our way out of these big traffic things? And that's what I want to ask first.
Yeah, people tend to think of traffic as flowing water. And so if it's slowing down, we need to add, more to the pipe. So more lanes. I don't like to say capacity in terms of adding a lane, because there's so many different factors that you can just add that. But if you don't address, safety issues or something else, like it's a moot point. But traffic really acts more like a gas, like it expands to fill the volume that's available. So if we add lanes, people are going to see that as a more opportunity, a better opportunity to drive that road. And so you'll see that where the traffic, reaches quote unquote that 20-year level, a year or two later, and you're still back in the same spot. And now you've gotten rid of green space and any opportunities for non-motorized. You've filled up your right of way. So if we think about like traffic as a gas, if you're trying to shove it through one pipe, that's high pressure. But if you try to branch it out into a network where you have different connections and alternate routes and different ways to go, then it's something that can flow and the pressure is lower.
Yeah, I like that. And so what you were describing just then, the traffic engineers call it latent demand, right? And planners, we call it latent demand on the road. So in other words, I wasn't using that road because it was a parking lot from 7 to 9 in the morning, but now there's more lanes and it's going to be nice and we'll slow down there. So is that the same with like express lanes when we do express and toll lanes, or is the demand different because of the incentive and the non-incentive to use the tolled versus other?
That's a little bit out of my pay grade. More economics on that one. So,
well, your gas theory plays on two things. A few years ago with the new tunnel that's being built to replace the Alaskan Way Viaduct in Seattle, the tunnel was not yet open, but the viaduct had to close, and it was the gas thing. The traffic just went away, and everybody's like, what the heck happened? And then Jess's question about tolls, there was a story just last week that because of the tolls on the new tunnel, they're not coming close to their revenue forecasts on that. And I look at it, and again, another episode of when we're actually asked to pay the full cost of driving, it's amazing how people make very different choices to avoid those things versus this predict and provide model of that. So I think that's all fascinating stuff. We want to get into a segment now that we've had some fun with before we wrap up, and that's just a rapid fire segment. It may have nothing to do with level of service. Do you agree with me as a Chicagoan that we should never have ketchup on hot dogs?
sport peppers and green relish, of course.
You guys are an abomination. It's ketchup and mayonnaise only.
Oh.
Oh,
Oh.
What's your favorite color?
purple.
Oh, I like it.
Ariana,
Or-
as a Michigander, I have to ask you this question. Has Bob Seeger, Michigan's favorite son, found his shelter yet?
I cannot say.
He's still
not...
searching for that shelter. Yeah, that's in like every other song that he has. Love you, Bob. But
It's in Ted Nugent's She Shed.
oh,
Very good.
Hey, why is Grand Rapids the most underrated city in the country?
Oh, let me see what our tourism stuff tells you. We have more breweries than you can shake a stick at. It has actually done a pretty good job of incorporating walkable. The downtown was dead, 30 years ago, and now it is. Every former furniture factory is filling with condos, and it's the hip place to be.
it's popping.
It is, yeah. Lower cost of living, at least for now. We just get enough snow to like have fun with it and not turn into The Shining at any moment. So that makes it a little bit better than Michigan, the rest of Michigan. So yeah, it's a good place. So
as a practicing engineer whose day-to-day job is so in tuned and involved in automobiles, I have to know, what's your favorite car?
I see. I drive like a really sensible engineer car now. Like
of course,
I drive a Subaru Ascent.
I like that car.
Yet? Does it bring you to that lovely?
It's all about love. Subaru love. I love that. I love
yeah,
my Subaru.
I have an affection for like really old, crappy Jeep Cherokees from the 90s.
Ooh.
I had a couple of those.
I forgot about the good old Jeep. Oh, she was great. But what about the FJ? What about that FJ?
The FJ Cruiser was good. It's like now my husband's long lost love because we sold it. So he's just
a Jeep,
so
just empty every pocket.
Yes, but you get yourselves a Haynes Spaniel. You
Yeah.
can get some parts off the internet. You got some.
I've got an 87 YJ, so yes, I know that experience.
Is there a childhood show that you used to watch that somehow influenced you to get into this profession that you're in today?
A childhood
Romper
show.
Room, maybe some Mr. Rogers, some episode that Mr. Rogers was playing with cars on the wall or the floor or something. I don't know. I'm just curious. Any
It was
cartoon?
probably Sesame Street. Duh.
I was saying I was
Yes.
a PBS kid, like not a whole lot of cable. So yeah, we'll have to go with Sesame Street. What was it, MathNet or something? All those dorky math shows probably got me into engineering.
I mean,
I think it would be like Sesame Strode if we were doing it today. They kind of did.
Oh,
Man, what's
nice
the LOS on Sesame Street?
Oh,
No, it's
Right?
not.
Like it would be a pedestrian LOS. Clearly, it would be
not it's a menagerie. What are you talking about?
That's true. Okay, that's a great word. I like that word.
Oh, my gosh.
Ambulatory.
Well, I mean,
level
heck,
of
even
service.
Mr. Rogers had a trolley.
This is true.
I mean, think
Yeah.
about
Oh,
that. Yeah.
y'all. Mr. Rogers grew up in Winter Park. Let's not even talk about how his neighborhood was not the one that most of us lived in. Okay. Anyway. Oh man. Do I have to edit that out too? I'm just really sad about it. It's very different. Anyway.
All right, Ariana, last one, I think. Oh shoot, it's kind of skipping my mind. Oh, never mind.
Jess had a question.
Just have
and
to
we'll
edit that one out.
Yeah.
editing.
I have a lot. I can add a lot of things. We have one more. What do you love about what you do?
I like that I can drive around and see, where, because traffic engineering gets a bad rap as being kind of, like the minions of developers and, trying to shove things through and say, it'll be fine. So I enjoy the, like, where I can drive around and see projects where I've taken traffic engineering and used it, for good, where
Not for evil.
Yeah. Where I've been able to go and speak that language to, the decision maker at a county road commission or DOT, and give them that data that they need to hold dear to their little hearts and feel, good about it, so that we can actually get things that, encourage people into these non-motorized, all these different modes and things like that. So that's what I enjoy. My kids are totally unimpressed when I'm like, made that tunnel happen. Yeah.
You drop a mic when you drop by that tunnel, and you just be like, "Yep, did that. That's my deal."
But they're like, Mom, who invented this bubble machine?
You ingrates that
Where-
rapid flash beacon at your school is because of me. Why can't you give me
That's
any
right.
credit for that?
Oh.
And it was way harder to get the rapid flash beacon put in than it was that tunnel, I bet, right? Like the tunnel blast heaven and earth. We got you, but that flashing beacon
Yeah.
delay. What?
Oh yeah.
All right. Well, Ariana, my last request is if you have a moment when you either before or coming up on your planning and zoning commission, when you wear that hat and you give the ultimate smackdown to some snot-nosed engineer who comes in and thinks they know better, can you please forward that to us? Because I would love to see that. Yes.
I've got some good ones.
I'm sure of it. I'm sure of it. Well, all right. Well, with that, this episode is going to come to a close. We hope that everybody got something out of it. An exploration of level of service. Thanks to Ariana Jeske. Ariana, thank you for coming into the commission today. We wish you all the best in the next week or two, and we appreciate your time. So with that, can I get a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Ooh.
All right. We are out. See you on the next side. Take care.